Okay, good morning, everybody. We are on Masechet Makkot Daf Yud Amud Aleph. Just before we move on with today's daf, so there was a question yesterday. We spoke at length about the concept of there being 3 Arei Miklat in Eretz Canaan and 3 Arei Miklat in Ever Yarden. Right, and the Gemara asked why it was that you had the same number of Arei Miklat in Ever Yarden, where you only have 2.5 Shvatim, as opposed to in Eretz Canaan, where you have 9.5 Shvatim, and you have the same number of Arei Miklat. And the Gemara's question was, although, yes, they are equidistant, but the point is, once you have the adequate number of Arei Miklat that you need, so then they're arranged in such a way that they should be equidistant. But in the first instance, who says that you need that many? And that's why we saw also by Shrem, we said it was a Shchichei Rotzchim. And the answer which the Gemara gave was that in Gilad, which is the area in Ever HaYarden, Shchichei Rotzchim, that there are more murders going to be taking place there. And therefore, you need more Arei Miklat. And all the Rishonim and all the Achronim asked the question, right? If it's more Rotzchim b'mezid, why do you need more Arei Miklat? Because the Arei Miklat are for people who go b'shogeg. So we gave a number of different answers, whether it's because the Rotzchim b'mezid will pretend that it was shogeg, whether it's because, as the Mishnah said, initially everybody runs to the Arei Miklat, including those who are Rotzchim b'mezid. There's the answer of Tosfot and a number of other answers which we discussed yesterday. If you missed it, you can look that up on YouTube. But there was a question. Simcha asked the question, which was, that's all very well that if at a certain point, as the Navi tells us, there were more Rotzchim on that side. But does this mean that forevermore there's going to be more Rotzchim there? Or why should this be relevant in the future? So the Aruch Lener asks the same question, and he asks it the following way. He says, in the future there won't be murder, and more than that, we have Gemaras that tell us in the future there won't be death won't take place either. Why was it necessary for this to be the case when the Ritzicha is not going to take place in the future? So he gives two answers. Answer number one, he says, first he says, because in the La'atid Lavo, Batel Yetzer Hara, he quotes the Gemara in Sukkah that tells us in the future there will be no Yetzer Hara, and therefore there will be no Horeg B'mezid. So his answer number one, he says, Sarich Lomar, Kevan dekvar hayu letzorech yisharu v'lo yibatlu. He says, Einachinami, meaning that in the future, that reason will no longer apply, but the mitzvah has been set up in such a way that it was necessary at that time, and it will remain at that time, and it won't be nullified. It's his first answer. Afterwards, he gives a second answer, very, very interesting, where he says the following, relating to this idea, which of Bilah HaMavet LaNetzach, that he says, Tzarich lomar demad amrinan divlah HaMavet, ze dafka shelo yeh mitat tiv'i. He says in the future there will not be natural death, mitat tiv'i me'atzmo al yedei malach HaMavet, aval ksheyitzach ha'adam vadai yamut gam limot HaMashiach. But he says even in the Limot HaMashiach it will still be possible. If a person will go and kill somebody else, then they could still die. Very, very interesting perush of the Aruch Laner, how that fits in with our conceptions of Yemot HaMashiach and of the Tchiat HaMeitim, etc. I'm not going to go into detail now, but I just thought it was interesting to give you that Marei Makom. So those are two. But again, the first answer, the more pshat answer, is that it was established this way. There was a reason at a certain time, but that continues, and that is the way the mitzvah was established. So moving on, yesterday we carried on. We spoke a little bit about some of the details of the Arei Miklat themselves. We saw there are 6 Arei Miklat specifically, and there are 42 Arei Leviim, which are also included, where a person could also run away to. The Gemara told us that the difference between those two was that the Arei Miklat themselves, these 6, are kotot bein ladat, bein shelo ladat, meaning if a person knows that it gives him immunity, right, from the Goel Adam, or whether he doesn't know, or he doesn't even know this is an Arei Miklat, then that din would still apply for those 6. But for the 42 Arei Leviim, only if one had the intention and one knew that there was providing them protection from the Goel Adam, would that be effective. And then we discussed that different characteristics of these cities, they need to be not too small, not too large, different parameters in order that there should be people there, that it shouldn't be easy and obvious for the Goel Adam to come there and to kill this person. He's not allowed to, but we don't want to make it too easy for him. And we also provide that there has to be water, there has to be, we mentioned the fact that there have to be signs in the way there, they have to be accessible. Needs to provide everything. This Goel, not the Goel Adam, excuse me, the Rotzeach may be in this Ir Miklat for a long time. So he needs to have all his needs provided for then. How long does he have to be there? So we know it's until the death of the Kohen Gadol. So he could be there for a week, he could be there for a month, he could be there for the rest of his life, depending on when the Kohen Gadol dies, and we'll see that a little bit later on as well. Today's daf continues.
Are they going to talk about, are there any physical differences between an Ir Miklat and a regular Ir?
Well, that's what we were discussing. In terms of, do you mean in terms of the Arei Leviim, or just in terms of?
No, just in terms of kind of the infrastructure. So when I think of an Ir Miklat, I think of like a city with walls around it, but it doesn't talk about that here at all.
So it's so it's a regular city, but certain things. So we said yesterday, it can't be you have small cities that you have very large cities. No, it's sort of a medium-sized city. We said it has to be well populated. It has to have villages around it so that people could give warning if the Goel Adam is on his way. We said you saw machloket whether you could sell weapons in it. Where we ended off yesterday was dealing with this question of mafshilin chavalim. Sort of putting out ropes inside. This seems to be an activity which you couldn't do everywhere. You could only do in certain places where you had enough space, and it's something which would attract a lot of people because it was something rare, so people would come there. So the idea is this is not a city where you're going to put have exclusive events where people are going to come from far and wide. We don't want people to come from far and wide because we don't want the Goel Adam to come. But we're going to continue now with some of the parameters of the Ir Miklat. And today's stuff primarily is going to talk about the value of Limud Torah. The value of Limud Torah and how it's related to all of these dinim. As I mentioned, I think yesterday in one of the previous shiurim, we're learning all these dinim of the Rotzeach and the Ir Miklat, which do not seem so relevant nowadays, are not practically relevant. But of course, Torah is eternally relevant, and there are all sorts of messages and things that we can learn from these halachot. So just before we jump into it, let me share with you. Actually, I'll put it up on the screen. So the Chashukei Chemed, which is Rav Zilberstein, he has, I've mentioned the Sefer before, he goes through Shas on each daf. He goes through different shailot, different questions which come up, practical shailas related to the daf, or he brings proofs from the daf itself. So he mentioned something over here. How do I do this? Share screen. Yeah, he mentioned something over here, which is not a shaila per se, but he discusses this idea of Gambi Amenu Yesh Dugmod L'Shchichut Rotzchim. Right? We spoke yesterday about the idea that you have more deaths taking place. The part of the idea is when people are less careful and people are less sensitized to the value of human life. You have more Ritzichot taking place. You have more accidents taking place as well. So he talks here. He goes waxes lyrical about the importance of following the rules of the road. This is probably the most commonplace example nowadays, unfortunately, where deaths can take place by accident, car accidents, and the like. So he talks about this example. He says, "Lifnei zman ma," should be able to see it on the screen. "Lifnei zman ma, autobus atzar b'charikat blamim be'ofin pitomi." So there was a case where a bus suddenly braked. B'toch ha'autobus amda isha b'malach hanesiya b'shel choser b'makomot yeshiva. There was a woman standing on the bus because there wasn't enough place to sit. כתוצאה מהעצירה פתאומית נפלה אותה אישה, נכבתה קשות ולבסוף נפטרה מפגיעה. So a tragic case over here where the bus suddenly stopped, somebody was standing, fell, as the bus came to an abrupt stop, and ultimately died from her wounds. So he says, מי שגרם לנהג האוטובוס להפעיל את מעצוריו, he has why did the bus come to a sudden stop? Because היה אדם שחצה את הכביש באור אדום. There was a pedestrian who was crossing the road when it was red for them. So this is an example of recklessness. That person crossing the road, they just saw they was going to cross, and the light was actually red for them. They ultimately caused the bus driver to stop, and that ultimately led to somebody's death. So you think, I'm just crossing, it's whatever it is. You see how careful one has to be. And he discusses over here who would be responsible in terms of the damages. He gives another case, a similar case, whereby somebody was driving their car and somebody crossed the road, and in order to, in this case, the driver couldn't brake in time, so he swerved his car, and he swerved into a car that was parked, and he damaged that car. Who's responsible? Is it the driver, or is it the one who crossed the road? Because he ultimately caused it. It caused that damage. And then he gives one more example here where he talks about a case where there was a car that was parked illegally somewhere. He says, מקרה נוסף שגם למיטה היה כאשר מכונית פרטית חנתה לכביש בצורה שאיננה חוקית, אמבולנס שהיה בדרכו לבית חולים אותת בצפירות רמות. So there was an ambulance that couldn't get to where it needed to go because this car was parked illegally on the street. Eventually, the guy came down from the building, he moved his car. In the interim, it could have been that the ambulance didn't get there and the person died. I'm not sure if that was the case over here, or he's just giving it as a hypothetical. But we see a number of different examples, just to bring it sort of into our frame of reference. It's not so common nowadays. Somebody's going to be going and chopping the wood or with the barrel, whatever it is. But yeah, you can see practical day-to-day examples which could actually lead to Rahman al-Islam could lead to this tragic outcome. Then he has another fascinating discussion, which I'm not going to go into now, about somebody who stopped his car, parked illegally because he wanted to go and buy food for Shabbat, and he asked if parking, because the Gemara tells us that a person gets back all the money that they spend on Shabbat and on Yom Tov, and he says the parking fine that he got, does that count as hotzat of Shabbat and Yom Tov? Just tell you, his conclusion is no. You can't do something illegal and then expect to get that paid back for that. In any event, let's go back into the Gemara now. We are on Daf Yud Amud Aleph, just at the beginning of the long lines. So. Sorry, not just at the beginning of the long lines, about 6 or 7 lines down from where the lines get longer. Where it says in the middle of the line, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Ma'ikra. Okay, so it's about 6 lines in from the wide lines, Daf Yud Amud Aleph. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Ma'ikra. In other words, until now, we've discussed all these different parameters, all these different things which have to be brought into the Ir Miklat, and how everything has to be provided for the person who's going to be there. So says Rabbi Yitzchak, how do we know this? Where does it come from? What is the source? What is the pasuk? So says the Torah, and he will flee to one of these cities and he will live. Have a look, just Rashi in a moment. Rashi now on the left-hand side. There's no Tosfot on this Amud, so you have Rashi on both sides of the Gemara. Rashi on the left-hand side, second line, it says, Ma'ikra, the matakninan lehu lerotzchim, davar shetzrchim, no, that we establish for these rotzchim everything which they need in the city. So because the pasuk tells us they'll flee and they will live, they'll be able to live. They'll have what they need in order to survive. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Ma'ikra nasa lachat min harim ha'avachai avid le'midei teheve le'chayuta. Right, do provide everything there, set it all up in such a way that a person can live, that a person can survive. And now we have a fascinating halacha. Says the Gemara, Tana, Talmid shegala megalin rabo imo shneimar v'chai. A Talmud who goes now into galut, you have a person who killed accidentally, he has to go into galut. His Rav has to go into galut with him. Right? Talmid shegala megalin rabo imo. The rabbi goes with him. Shenemar v'chai, based on the same drasha. It says v'chai. Avid le'midei teheve le'chayuta. Do what he needs to do in order that he can survive. Okay, let me read through a few more lines in the Gemara, and then we'll go back and explain. Amar Rabbi Zera, mikan shelo yishaneh adam letalmid she'eno hagud. So says Rabbi Zera, from here we learn that a person has to be careful. A person has to be somewhat selective in terms of who they teach. Right? If the Rav's going to teach all sorts of people who are going to be involved in this kind of activity, and it's going to lead to the fact that they're going to be killing somebody, they're going to go into galut. So this is a warning for the Rav. You don't want to go into Galut, so be careful who your Talmidim are. So he says, Amar Rabbi Zera mikan shelo yishana adam l'talmid she'eino agun. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now it tells us another halacha. Harav shegala megalin yeshivato imo. Okay, so if the Talmud goes into Galut, so the Rav has to go with him. Says Rabbi Yochanan, if the Rav ended up accidentally killing somebody, the whole yeshiva has to go with him. And then the Gemara is going to ask a question and discuss. We'll come back in a moment. So first of all, there is I don't like saying famous sources, but there's a famous Rambam over here regarding this halacha. And the language of the Rambam is quite something. Let me share it with you. Very, very short, but it's worth seeing inside. Sorry, for some reason I can't share. Let's try it again. Here it is. Okay. All right, so you can have a look. You can see over here. This is the Rambam in Hilchot Rotzeach, Perek Zayin, Halacha Aleph. He says, Talmid shegala la'arei miklat, megalin rabo imo shne'emar v'chai. Say lo kadei she'ichyah. A Talmid who goes into Galut, who has to go into the Er Miklat, his Rav goes with him. As it says, v'chai, you have to do whatever they need so that they can live. V'chayei ba'alei ha'chokhmah u'mevakshea belo tamud k'mitah chashuvin. He says the life of those who are ba'alei chokhmah, those who have wisdom, not just ba'alei chokhmah, but mevakshea, those who seek wisdom, right? Belo Talmud, without learning, without Torah, k'mitah chashuvin. That is equivalent to death. So amazing. So says the Rambam. From here we understand just how central Talmud Torah is to us, how central it is to our life. You cannot live, literally, you cannot live without it. And therefore, if this person has to go into the Er Miklat, you say, what's the Rab's fault? Okay, so that's what Rabbi Zera says in the continuation. Rabbi Zera says you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful who you're teaching. You'll tell me this is all accidental. This is b'shogeg. Says we'll see. The Gemara on the next Amud says not necessarily. Even if it's shogeg, there's might be a reason why it happened to this person, or as we know, it's not completely. There is a certain degree of recklessness in it. But in any event, says you could say, what's the Rab's fault? The answer is maybe it's not his fault, but the Talmud has to live. If you can't study, can't learn Torah, that's something which is as great as life itself. You could ask the question, why can't he just go and learn from somebody else? Why can't they open a yeshiva in the Ir Miklat, right? Or if it's one of the Arei Leviim, surely there are Leviim there who can teach Torah. So the Ritva writes here, and others write, say, Lom. Let me find you the language in the Ritva as well. He says the lo mikol adam zochel le'umod, meaning that there's something when there's a connection which is formed between a Rav and a Talmud. You don't always a person's not always able to learn from everybody to the same degree, and therefore if it's his Rabbi who he learns from, and he's not going to be able to learn from, he's not going to be able to learn as well from anybody else, then the Rabbi goes with him. What would we say nowadays when you could just, he could learn from him on Zoom? Does the Rebbe still have to go into Galut when he can give the Shurim over Zoom? So I don't know. That will be a question for the Sanhedrin when it becomes relevant again. Maybe yes, maybe no. But we'll leave that. That's something to think about.
Are you not also punishing the Rav, or if the Rav is the one who has to go into the Ir Miklat, that his whole yeshiva comes in? Aren't you punishing everybody?
Oh, yeah, fair. Fantastic question. So, aren't you punishing everybody else? So there's actually a machloket over here between amongst the Mefarshim as to what this case is referring to. It says, if you have a look, the Gemara mentions two cases. First of all, that's what Rabbi Zera comes to say, that you should try and avoid this. That there is an element of punishment here. There is an element of bitul Torah that's going to come about, and therefore the Rav should be careful before he decides who to teach. But It's like this. The Gemara says that if the Talmud goes into the Ir Miklat, then the Rav goes with it. If the Rav goes into the Ir Miklat, it says the whole yeshiva goes with it. Right? It doesn't say in the first case that if the Talmud goes in, the whole yeshiva has to go as well. So what case is it referring to? So there are some Mefarshim who understand that it's talking about if you have a Rav who has one Talmud, okay, and then that's when he goes. There's nobody else who's going to be affected. That's when he goes with him. That's when he goes into Galut. But if he's a Rosh Hashiva and he has hundreds of Talmidim, and it's just one Talmid who went and who left and who went into Galut, then no, then he doesn't go with him. That's not the case the Gemara is referring to. That's one approach. I think it's the Iyun Yaakov who says that. I don't remember. But there are other opinions, and I think it's the Aruch now who says actually no. He says even in that case, he would go with him, and that's what Rabbi Zera is coming to teach you. Rabbi Zera is coming to teach you. Don't think that you'll say, what difference does it make who I teach? I'll teach everybody. I'll teach as many people as possible. Yagdil Torah v'yadir. Saying no, you're going to teach Talmidim she'enam hagunim. You're going to teach people of unscrupulous character, and you're going to end up in a situation where you're going to go into Galut, and you're actually going to end up with more Bittul Torah because you won't be able to teach everybody else. So that is a machloket in Mefarshim, how to understand that. They do point out that in the latter case, by the way, where the Rav goes to Galut and the whole yeshiva goes with him, if somebody then wants to leave the Ir Miklat, wants to go and learn from somebody else, they can do that. But if they want to stay learning from him, then they have to go with. So Rav Zilberstein also asked, he has an interesting question. And again, in the Chashukei Chemed, he had a case whereby the following: somebody who went into, let me find it. Yeah, a Talmud who was in hospital, and he says his Rav has to come with him. He says there was a Talmud who wanted to learn, and he's in hospital, and he says his Maggid Shir from the yeshiva has to come to teach him Torah in the hospital. Why? Because they were learning Masechet Makkot. He says it says in the Gemara that a Talmud who goes into Galut, so his Rav comes with him because it says V'chai. He says, well, now I'm in hospital, and it also says V'chai by Pikuach Nefesh, and therefore I want the Rav to come with and to come teach the Shir in the hospital. Does he have to come, and does the whole yeshiva have to move with him? So says Rav Silberstein, maybe it's dependent on this machloket which we've just said, that if the Rav only has one Talmud, he has to go. But if the Rav has other Talmudim, then he doesn't necessarily have to go. He can stay behind and teach them. At the end of the day, he says the case of a hospital, it's not quite the same. This is a special halacha which is taught regarding an Ir Miklat, not regarding every single case. So he says if they want to go and they give the shir over there, it's definitely a mitzvah of Bikol Cholim, and they can do it, and it's maybe a midat chasidut, but it's not obligatory. Okay, just on this point of Talmud Torah being as valuable as life itself. So this is familiar to us from a number of other places in the Gemara. And I'll share the screen with you again. The Gemara in Brachot, Daf Samech Aleph, Amud Aleph, basically says the same idea. This is the Gemara with Rabbi Akiva and Pappus, where it says that the Romans decreed that one could not learn Torah. You'll see over here, it says Tana Rabbanan. I'm halfway down the screen here. I've highlighted for you. Tana Rabbanan, Pam Achat Gazra Malchut HaSha'ah. They decreed that Am Yisrael would not learn Torah. Papus ben Yehuda v'nimtzu Rabbi Akiva she'amakil kilot barabim v'osek b'Torah. He found that Rabbi Akiva was gathering people together and learning. So Amarle Akiva iyata mitarei mipnei malchut. He said, Akiva, are you not scared of the malchut? They've decreed against us that we cannot learn, and you're going out and teaching Torah publicly. So Amarlo emsholach hamashal. And he says that this is the mashal of the fox and the fish. He says, there was a fox that was walking along the river. He saw fish that were jumping from one place to another. Says the fox to the fish, what are you doing? What are you trying to run away from? Right? People coming to fish with their nets, and they're putting these nets in the water. The fish are swimming this way and that way and jumping to get away from the nets. So Amar Lahem, says the fox, I have a wonderful idea for you. He says, just you're jumping around from the nets in the river, just come onto the dry land. Come be with me on the dry land, and everything will be fine. Then the fishermen won't get to you. Samrulo, so they say to him, you the one they say is a cunning animal. You're not smart, you're stupid. If in the water, which is the place which gives us life, we are scared, we're afraid. We're going to go into the dry land. Dry land, we're dead before we even start. So says Rabbi Akiva, same thing. Now we sit there, we learn Torah. This is our life. If we are going to not study Torah, so we don't have life even to begin with. So of course, all the more so, and we know that was the story of Rabbi Akiva. Afterwards, he was caught by the Romans and he was taken out to death. But we see this idea, how central the importance again of Talmud Torah, that literally is something which we cannot live without, and that is why the Talmud in the Miklat, if he has to go into Galut, so his Rav has to go into Galut as well. Just one more point. Yeah.
Just ask a question. I don't understand the logic of the one who says that even if he has other students, the Rav goes to Galut with his killing student. First of all, if we still continue to think of it as a purely accidental thing, I don't know, it seems like it's a punishment for the rabbi. It may be great for the Talmud, but if the logic is v'chai bahem, what about v'chai bahem for the other students? I mean, they need the rabbi to be v'chai bahem. Why should one individual's chai bahem trump many students v'chai bahem needs? Right.
No, that's a fair point. It's an excellent point. And I think that's why you probably have the majority opinion here is probably that if there are other students, that he wouldn't go into Galut, because of that v'chai bahem, right? The other one, what would you say? If you were to argue that the Rav would have to go, even if there are other students, I guess they would say that the other students can come with as well. That they're allowed to come with as well. But I think yes. Because of that point and because of the strength of your question, that is why the Yaakov and many others say that no, this would be referring to the case whereby that is the only student, not where others are going to be penalized. And the other point is, yeah, correct. I mean, it is accidental, although as we've seen, there is, it's somewhere on the, there's somewhere on I guess, a spectrum between something which is purely accidental, something which is purely intentional, and we know that this case is somewhere in the middle, meaning that there is a certain element of responsibility. It's not, if it was completely accidental, was completely honest, then there would be no galut. And the Gemara is going to imply on the next Amud that if such a case was to happen to somebody, then there is a cheshbon mishamayim that there was a reason that it was that it was meant to happen. But nonetheless, that is why Rabbi Zera says, and the pshat in Rabbi Zera's words, that there is an element of punishment for the Rav if this would happen, and therefore he needs to be careful in terms of who he in terms of who he comes to contact with and who he decides to teach.
Just one other point, I'm sorry. The language of the Rambam seems a little ambiguous. It could be interpreted that if a pupil kills accidentally, the Rav goes to Galut, and if the Rav goes to Galut, all the Talmidim go with him, the yeshiva goes with him. The Rav didn't kill. Not a case where the Rav killed and then the Talmidim go, but seems to follow. The Talmid kills, the Rav goes with him, and the consequence of that is that the whole yeshiva goes with the Rav, not necessarily that it's a separate case where the Rav killed.
Right. So I think so. If we didn't have it in the Gemara, then we could question what the Rambam's trying to say. But I think because the Gemara presents it as two separate cases, therefore it seems more likely to say that when the Rambam writes v'chein harav shegala, he's talking about a separate case. And so, meaning there is a case whereby Talmid shegala l'arei miklat megalin rabo imo. If a Talmid goes to an arei miklat, so the Rav goes with him. And so too, there is another case whereby a Rav shegala, where the Rav who goes into galut megalin yeshivato imo. I think, and that's how I think most of Farshim understand that that he is dealing with the two separate cases there, again, based on the fact that the Gemara presents them as two separate cases. Okay, so just one more point I wanted to mention while we're talking about this, because we're talking about going into Galut for the sake of Talmud Torah. So this is something which the Gemara addresses in Masechet Avodah Zarah, and the Poskim discuss that one of the reasons why a person could go into Galut, not into Galut in Ir Miklat, but to go into Galut, meaning to leave Eretz Yisrael, is for the sake of Limud Torah. Same idea, that there is a halacha, that all other things being equal, a person should not leave. There is an issur of leaving Eretz Yisrael. But the Gemara says, and the Rambam writes, that if it's in order to get married, or if it's in order to learn Torah, then one is allowed to leave. It's also brought that if it's for the sake of business, in order to earn a livelihood, one is also allowed to leave. And again, the concept of limud Torah, meaning you could say, why can't one just learn wherever they are? Again, as we explained, not everybody can learn from every rabbi. A person has a certain rav, a certain derech where they have where they're going to learn quantitatively and qualitatively in a much greater degree. That would not be possible. For that, they are allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. The poskim discuss precisely what is the case being discussed over there of leaving Eretz Yisrael, and most would seem to agree that it's talking about leaving on a long-term basis. Going to live somewhere else, or going in those days. Again, where if somebody left, it wasn't like today when you're going to go, you buy a ticket, you can come back in a week or a month or whatever it is. You go on the boat, you leave, you go to Medinat Hayam. Who knows if you're ever going to come back, and you're essentially taking a risk. So nowadays, most poskim would agree that a person's going certainly for a short time, so long as someone has a good reason. Again, a good reason could be many, many different things. Could be visiting family, could be visiting friends, could be even the poskim discuss in great detail is going on holiday. Is one allowed to go? You want to go and see the sights of the world. You want to see wonders of nature in Europe, in America, wherever it is. If you live in Israel, could you go, and are you allowed? Just for the sake of a holiday. So there are some poskim who are vehemently opposed to it and who write against it in very, very strong language. But there are many poskim who do allow it, especially talking about just a short-term visit. That would seem to be permitted according to many. But again, for the sake of limud Torah, even if it's for long term, and even if it's to go somewhere else. Again, nowadays, you probably have greater opportunities of limud Torah in Eretz Yisrael than you do anywhere else. So that would be less relevant. But that is something which is brought. Again, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah discusses that. So going back into our Gemara, so we said number one, Talmud who goes to Galut, the Rav goes with him. And then we said from here, a person should not teach a Talmud as they know how good. Then we said the Rav who goes into Galut, the Yeshiva goes with him. Now ask the Gemara the following question. So we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 lines in from the wide lines. The Gemara says, Eini, is that really so? Meaning, is that really so that the Rav and together with his Yeshiva have to go into Galut? Why? V'ha amar Rabbi Yochanan. Minayin ledivrei Torah shehein koltin shene'amaret betze b'midbar v'gomer uchtiv batrei v'zot haTorah. Says Rabbi Yochanan, really does the Rav actually have to go into Galut? Because the divrei Torah are koltin. So this word koltin, which literally means to absorb, but we've seen it before, where in the context of when one goes, does the Ir Miklat absorb one, or does it provide that protection from the Goel Adam? So in the same way that the Ir Miklat itself provides protection, so too the Torah which a person studies would provide protection. Okay, he says, Minayin ledivrei Torah she'en koltin, and how does he learn this? Where does he learn this out from? He says it means that Betzer Bamidbar. These are the psukim which are talking about the Arei Miklat. Again, it mentions Betzer and this is the Arei Miklat, and then it says the next pasuk, V'zot HaTorah. In other words, there's a juxtaposition from the concept of the Ir Miklat and the concept of the Torah, which means that if a person is studying and a person's teaching Torah, the Goel Adam would not be allowed to kill him. So answers the Gemara, Lo kasha, ha be'idna da'asik ba, ha be'idna de lo asik ba. Says it's not a contradiction. One is talking about It depends if it's the time when a person is actually engaged in studying Torah, or the time when a person is not engaged in studying Torah. In other words, while the Rav is teaching in the yeshiva, yes, the Goel Adam is not allowed to harm him. But if it's the time when he's not teaching, so then he's then he would be, unless he's in the Ir Miklat, and that's why he has to go. That's why he has to go to the Ir Miklat. A second answer says the Gemara, Ibait Ema, Mai Kotin mi Malach HaMavet. It says no. Second answer is, what does the Divrei Torah provide protection from? They don't provide protection from the Goel Adam, but they provide protection from the Malach HaMavet. And he has a story, and the Gemara has a number of stories like this in different places. There's one in Masechet Brachot, talks about David HaMelech. Over here, it talks about Kiad Rav Chisda. Havayati v'garis b'veirav. Rav Chisda was sitting and learning. V'lo avaka yachol shlichei de malach ha'demuta lamikrav legabe. The shaliach, the Malach HaMavet, could not approach him, could not come close to him while he was learning. The words did not stop from his mouth, meaning he did not stop learning. Salik v'yativa alza deveirav. So the Malach HaMavet went, or went and sat by the erez, by the cedar tree that was there near the Beit Midrash. Paka alza, it broke and made a noise. V'shatik, and Rav Chisda stopped learning for a moment, and then v'yachilei, and that was when the Malach HaMavet was able to take it. Okay, so the words of Torah provide protection either from the Goel Adam or from the Malach HaMavet. I just want to share with you an amazing Aruch LaNer, which I saw this morning. Aruch LaNer discusses over here. He asks the question. He says, first of all, what is the connection between the fact over there that it's an Ir Miklat, and then that it says Zot HaTorah? I'll show it inside. It's somewhat lengthy, but let's read it together. Moment. Of course, disappeared. Sorry, one moment. Here it is. Okay, I'll put it up on the screen for you now. Okay. So says the Aruch LaNer, very, very interesting parush over here. He says, Bigmara, Michael Tinmi Malach HaMavet. Says, Kitzat Kasher, it's a little bit difficult. Darei Rabbi Yochanan Yalif had koletet HaTorah. Said the fact that the Torah will give protection from the Goel Adam. Rabbi Yochanan learns from Midasamich v'zot HaTorah lahai darei miklat. V'heach shayach leilaf mizeh klita Malach HaMavet. Right, meaning what's it got to do? The fact over there it's talking about the Arei Miklat, and how can you learn from there? According to this answer that the Torah protects you from the Malach HaMavet. What's one got to do with the other? So he says, Yesh lomar al pi ma sheperashti ma'di'ita b'midrash. So he brings this midrash, which says, Lama tziva kadosh baruch hu le'shev b'sukkah achal Yom Kippurim. Why did Hashem command that we sit in a sukkah after Yom Kippur? De'amar kadosh baruch hu b'rosh Hashanah nidonim Yisrael u'v'Yom Kippur ani chotem et adin. There's a midrash which says that on Rosh Hashanah we are judged, and on Yom Kippur the judgment is sealed. And in case we have been judged that we need to go into Galot, so the Sukkah, we leave our homes and we go into exile in the Sukkah, and with that we complete the atonement, so to speak, from Yom Kippur. So he says, Yesh litmoa. D'mima nafshach im nimchalu avonotehem. If Yom Kippur provided us atonement, then why do we need to go into Galut? And if we were not forgiven, why Dafka Galut? Why not Mitot Beitin? Why not Karet? Etc. So then he quotes another midrash. Okay, bear with me. This is all going to come together shortly. So he quotes the midrash from the Yalkut Shimoni, which says, Shalul midat adin. Right? They asked Midat Adin, the attribute of judgment. Chotem adino. What should a sinner do? Veheshiv. nefesh hachoteti tamut. Right? Midat adin, as you might expect, says if somebody has sinned, then they should be punished. So then, Shalul HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chotei Madino, Heshiv Yaseh Tshuva V'Yitchaper Lo. They asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, what should a sinner do? And Hashem said he can do tshuva and he'll be forgiven. So essentially, okay, I'm not going to read everything inside now, because it's quite long. But what he then explains is that there's an idea. He says that when a person sins, so there is an element there of shfichat dam, of spilling the blood, of oneself, of the tzelem elokim. A person has within themselves a tzelem elokim, which is damaged, which is affected by the fact that one sinned, one went against what they were meant to do, what the neshama really wanted, and therefore there's an element here metaphorically of every time that a person is a sinner that is in a sense comparable to the rotzeach. Who have you killed? The tzelem elokim within you. And then he says, okay, when it comes to doing tshuva, when he says tshuva, there are two types of tshuva. There's tshuva me'ira and tshuva me'ava. So he said, most people do tshuva. It's tshuva me'ira. You're afraid of punishment. You're afraid of fear, whatever it may be. And what does the Gemara say? The Gemara says that tshuva me'ira turns zdonot into shgagot. It turns things that we've done willfully into accidental transgressions. So he says, here is what happens. He says, essentially what we're saying is that comes Yom Kippur and everybody does tshuva. Everybody does tshuva mi'irah. So now the sins which you had before, which were chata'im, which we said are comparable to ritzicha. A person was a rotzeach against the nefesh elokim, which was within them, against the tzelem elokim that was within them. When they do tshuva mi'irah, they are no longer a rotzeach be-mezid, but rather rotzeach be-shogeg. Right? It's unintentional now. What is the punishment for rotzeach be-shogeg? The punishment is galut. So he says that for that, that's the explanation. That's the galut of the sukkah, so to speak, and the malach hamavet is the goel adam, as it were. So the malach hamavet is the goel adam for those things which are now b'shogeg. That's how he explains the connection between the idea of the malach hamavet versus the idea of the goel adam, saying essentially everyone is a rotzeach to an extent against their tzelem elokim, and when they've done tshuva, then that turns from mezid to shogeg. But so therefore you have the galut. That's the explanation of the galut of the sukkah. But you still have the goel adam, which is the malach hamavet, and therefore Torah, which it says zot Torah after the Arei Miklat, that is referring as well to the klita, which you get the protection from the malach hamavet. I thought that was a fascinating connection between those two ideas. Brought in the Aruch LaNer. Okay, I'd count for today, and we'll pick it up tomorrow from there.
That was
Rabbi
very
Kenigsberg.
Thank you.
Rabbi Kenigsberg.